Welcome to the House of Truth. Today we're continuing our series, our relatively new series on the days of the kingdom. We're talking about the destructive king. We'd seen before how Saul was chosen because he met the demands of the people. He was a king after their choosing, even though God picked him out. They approved him. He checked all the boxes they wanted, and they checked all the boxes they wanted. But he wasn't the choice of God. He was from the wrong tribe, the tribe of Benjamin. There's that connection between that of being the son of the right hand and being a wolf. The son of the right hand is like a prime minister and doesn't always have the wisdom of the king, but is excellent at carrying out what the king orders, making sure it gets done. And the king was associated with the tribe of Judah, and as well as the lion. The lion, remember, was strategic in the way it hunted, in the way it hunted everything. And it speaks of this being more strategic in the thinking. The wolf, on the other hand, is much more tactical and just and looks for opportunities and destroys more than it needs to often, just because it likes destroy. Just like it enjoys the destruction, and that's where Saul was from. Sure. And we end it with a warning in all that, in all that against people who tell us we can because this was part of it. It tell us we can obey. We don't have to obey God. We can do the things like fornicate, except and not and still inherit the kingdom of God. And the Bible made it very plain that anyone does that in 1 Corinthians 6 and in Ephesians, that they are deceivers, because this was part of the problem that led was this was part of this tied into the problem that Saul had, this warning that Samuel gave. Don't be fooled by that. But still, a warning is still for us today. Okay, so today we're going to look at the destructive king. We're going to start with some background information to help us tie this together. And you'll see the relevancy as we go along. In 1 Samuel, a little short recap here. In 1 Samuel 8, 9 through 12, read the following. Now, this is the Lord speaking to Samuel at the beginning here. Now, therefore, hearken to their voice, albeit Saul protested them, show the man of the king that shall reign over them. And Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people that asked him of a king. He said, "This is the man of the king that will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, and for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. He will appoint him captains over thousands and captains over fifties, and set them to ear his ground and reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war and instruments of his chariots." Okay, so Samuel had said they want a king like the other nations, and Samuel told him, "The Lord's giving you what you want, so you're going to get a king that treats you like those nations, like those kings treat the people in their nations." So, and part of that was this conscription or draft. In America, we had a draft, but other places called conscription. The conscription was a little different. They would just do it on the spot. For the draft, they gave you notice. And this is more like that conscription that led to the War of 1812, Britain conscripting Americans into the British Navy on the spot, treating them as if they were still British subjects. And you know, they got America said, "No, you're not." Britain came over, they got their butts kicked, and they never harassed us, and they never did that again. But no such relief here for these. God, I told them, "Don't come crying to me when you hate the way things turn out." So this part, how this, he's just going to take their healthiest, strongest sons, whoever, and conscript them into the army on the spot, and not necessarily tell the parents or anything. Just one day their son didn't come home. Later they learn he's in Saul's army, where he wanted to be or not. But in the meanwhile, they don't know if a wild animal killed him or what happened. Now we continue on here in 1 Samuel 8, verses 18 through 20. Read the following: You shall cry out in that day because of your king which you have chosen you. The Lord will hear you in that day. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. And they said, Nay, but we shall have a king over us, that we may be also like all the nations that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. Okay. Well, we had seen that they demanded a king and those to go out before us and fight our battles. Samuel was old this time, but was old this time and perhaps not able to go before them. He had called them Mitzvah once before, and the Lord had thundered upon the people, upon the enemies, the Philistines at Mitzvah, destroyed a bunch of them, and Israel had fought. He was able somewhat successfully in rallying the troops, getting people to go. Unlike Saul we saw, we'll see again, and Samson and Shamgar, were out there fighting them all by themselves. But Saul's the king, and he didn't have to fight them all by himself. The judge had no power to conscript people, but the king does. So he's warned them what's going to happen. It's that you have chosen. Again, Saul checked all the boxes. Like the kings of other nations, he was taller than everyone else, strong, good looking, and all those other superficial things people look for in a king. Those surface all that surface things that according to the flesh are pleasing to the eye and give people a feeling of confidence. Saul had all those things. And they want the king to judge them instead of Samuel, but Samuel actually does all the judging, as we saw before, a little summary of his life up till the day of his death. Saul's not really going to make a good judge. His job is to destroy the enemies of Israel, the enemies of God. So to do that, and Samuel had given them, if you remember this, if you were there, this rather involved prophecy with a lot of details, and embedded, and then there were also instructions. And the instructions at the end, after he met with the prophets and began prophesying and stuff, was this. And there's no time limit. There's no sense of time given in there. Just like one event will occur to another, no idea of how long there is between events. But here's the final bit of instruction he gives him. Shall go down before me to Gilgal. Behold, I will come down to you to offer burnt offerings and sacrifice of peace offerings. 7 days you shall tarry till I come with you and show you what you shall do. Okay, we saw when he renewed the kingdom that he went down to Gilgal with him, but Saul didn't go before him and have to wait 7 days. Okay, so those are the instructions. And notice, show you what you shall do. This is why Samuel is going to continue to judge cases, not Saul. Saul, as we will see, he's kind of like people in America sometimes refer to as a dumb jock. Not to say everyone involved in sports is like this, but it's but when some people say they're referring to someone who's big and strong, but needs someone else tell him what to do all the time. Without the coach or that manager's baseball or that boxing coach, I guess they're called in boxing, they don't really know what to do. They're very good at destroying, and they're very good at destroying and using their strength. But they need wisdom, some wisdom to guide them in using that. And that's to be Samuel's role here. So all Saul has to do is sit there and do what Samuel said, And Samuel give him more instruction so he can continue to act wisely and continue to have victory like he had before after they renewed the kingdom. Remember, the people had God save the king, and then there was a crisis. No one came, and Saul had to threaten them. But now, and then they renewed the kingdom afterwards, and took care of the problem. But Samuel was the one key to all that, to that. He's the one who said we got to renew the kingdom again, take them down to Gilgal again, remind them that they called for you to be king, and again, and they should have came without you having to threaten them because they selected you as king. Now we're going to pick up here in 1 Samuel 13, verses 1 and 5. And Saul reigned 1 year, and when he had reigned 2 years over Israel, Saul chose him 3,000 men of Israel, whereof 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash and in Mount Bethel, and 1,000 with Jonathan in Gibeah of Bethlehem of Benjamin. And the rest of the people they sent every man to his tent. And Jonathan smote the garrison of the Philistines that were in Gibeah, and the Philistines heard of it. And Saul blew the trumpet through all of the land, saying, let the Hebrews hear. And all Israel heard say that Saul had smitten the garrison of the Philistines. And so Israel was an abomination with the Philistines. And the people were all called together after Saul to Gilgal. And the Philistines gathered themselves to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots and 606,000 horsemen. And people, the sand of the sea, which is in the seashore in multitude, they came up and pitched in Michmash, eastward from Beth Aven. Okay, so there's a number of important things here. Another of important things here in this first little part here, and among them we see this. It's Saul. All right, so now it reigned 2 years. He reigned 1 year. He reigned 2 years, and we'll look in the future and see exactly how that plays out. But we'll just assume right now he's got a 40-year reign. It started when Samuel acknowledged him as king the first time. And this is a year or two after after he renewed the kingdom. And let's take a little study to find out how long there is between those two events. But for the day, we don't really have to know that. But what we do need is knows is what some of these words mean, because they're very important. Okay, chosen 3,000 men of Israel, and 2,000 women in Michmash, and 1,000 were Jonathan. He's put Jonathan, leader over a third of the army. Okay, in Gibeah of Benjamin, that's his town. But notice where they're at with Michmash and about Mount Bethel. Bethel's the house of God. Michmash means hidden, and it's this very strategic location where there's kind of one way in, one way up, and it's treacherous. It's a high ground. It's very defendable, and that's where Saul's at. And that's where Saul's at when he does this division. And he sent everyone else home. Okay. So he called them all, chose 3,000 and sent the rest home. All right. He looked for the strongest, best ones. They want to be in the army or not. And they are now. And now I smote them in Gibeah. Gibeah means hill. Remember, we'd seen that word before. And so he's at this hill, and there's probably a good place to, you can see probably a long distance in different directions from that hill. But a little watchtower on it, a little garrison up there. And Jonathan took his 1,000 men and smote them. And the Philistines heard it. Now Saul's blew the trumpet. And remember, that means everyone knows if he blows that once, the leaders come. If it gets blown, well, the priests actually blow that. But it's the same idea. If it blows it twice, everyone comes. Okay, so they're all come. So they're all coming, and notice they heard notice they said this heard that Saul had smitten the garrison of the Philistines. Well, he hadn't done it directly. His son did it actually. And now they're worried because the Philistines, remember the Philistines reigned, and it was Samson, bringing the house down on them, living under Philistine oppression. Well, they were under 50, 60 more years before they began pushing that back under Samuel. But there's still a lot of other forces we'll see later oppressing them as well. And now, they're worried about the Philistines coming to bring revenge on them. And that's what the Philistines totally intend to do. 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen. And notice, people is a sand of the sea, which is more a multitude. That's a figure of speech. And it was used of Israel when they came into the land of an army of 600,000. It may refer to a smaller army, but remember last week, the army that Saul was able to muster was 330,000. So, and they didn't have iron chariots. And we'll see the situation that's going on with them, how Israel's kind of in the bad straits here. But notice Saul makes a very strategic thing. He blew a trumpet, and where'd he gather them at? At Gilgal. Gilgal. I just write the map here, but no, sorry, what? Gilgal here is down by Jericho. Michmash is up in here, very defendable. This is very undefendable. It was a very foolish place for him to call him. The only reason the only wise reason he could have had for that was Samuel had told him to do it. But if he did it on his own initiative, it was very foolish. Now, if Samuel told him and it was God's plan, it'd be a plan to draw them down there where God could destroy them. Okay, that was wise. But otherwise, it was a very foolish thing to do to be up in the high ground, the very strategic place. And notice the Philistines moved right in there and took that place for them. Now, Beth Aven is house of the caves. I'm sorry, I'm ahead. Beth Aven's the house of vanity. So there's an association there with or idols, an association with idolatry in that area as well. And nonetheless, it's a strategic spot. And Gilgal is associated with the foreskin, the renewing of the covenant with God, with Joshua under Joshua, where he circumcised everyone but him and Caleb, who were already circumcised, because no one had been circumcised in the wilderness when they came in the land, renewed the covenant they had with God concerning circumcision. So this is low, but it's associated with and Samuel may have told him to do this. And if he did, okay, then it was wise. But otherwise, it appears foolish on the surface for certain. It would be unless God told you to do it. It wouldn't be strategically thinking at all. But that's where Samuel had Saul call the people the other two times before. When they first chosen as king and when they renewed the kingdom. So Saul may just went down there thinking that's what we do. Okay, when the people of Israel, so we're looking at how the people of Israel respond to this, it's very bad, unless God's going to do something spectacular, bad strategy of going to Gilgal, the high ground, the defensible place, go down to the low ground. Remember before this, they were called up to war. They were called in Mitzvah, the watchtower, where they couldn't be, no one could catch them off guard and come upon them, and catch them, attack them, surprise attack them or sneak attack them or anything like that. But now he's down there in this very bad place to defend, not far from Jericho, the lowest city on earth, not far from the Dead Sea, the lowest place on earth. So here's what the people look. Here's what the people understand all this, and here's what they do. The men of Israel saw that they were in a strait, but the people were distressed. The people hid themselves in caves and in thickets and in rocks and in high places and in pits. And some of the Hebrews went over to Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. As for Saul, he was yet in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. And he tarried 7 days according to the time that Samuel appointed. But Samuel came not to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. Okay, so they saw they were straight. They saw they understood what Saul didn't seem to, that how vulnerable they'd made themselves to be just wiped out by the Philistines. So they started hiding in all these places, hiding anywhere they could from the Philistines. And notice some went to the high places where they had some strategic advantage, in caves, in thickets, okay? Places that are hard for people to go through, hard to locate. Now but everyone else who followed him was trembling. Now, Samuel came not to Gilgal he tarried 7 days there. He waited 7 days. Perhaps he thought this is really the time. We don't know. Samuel may have told him to go down there at this time, but it's been a couple of years. But maybe Saul thought, well, this is where I've always met Samuel. This is where he got the people to rally with me. But either way, he's waiting. He knows he's got to wait for 7 days. This is the time that Samuel talked about and spoken of before. Well, the 7 days go by, and Samuel didn't show up at the set time appointed, the set time of day. Who knows? Delayed for whatever reason. But really, it's all the tests. It's really a test of Saul. All this is to put himself in this vulnerable position, and then Samuel being late may not have been Samuel's intention, but it's certainly the Lord's. The test where Saul was going to obey the instructions or not given to him by the Lord through Samuel. Shemuel, heard by God. His wife, God heard his mother's plea for him. Well, let's continue on here in 1 Samuel 13, 9, and 12. Verses 9 and 12. And Saul said, Bring hither a burnt offering to me and peace offerings. He offered the burnt offering. It came to pass as he made an offering the burnt offering. Behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out that he might to meet him, he might salute him. And Samuel said, What have you done? Saul said, Because the people were scattered from me, you came not within the days appointed. The Philistines gathered themselves to Michmash. Therefore, I said, the Philistines will come upon me to Gilgal. And I made supplication to the Lord. Therefore, I forced myself and offered a burnt offering. Okay, Saul didn't want to do this, but he felt like he had no choice. That wasn't what the instructions said. As soon as a crisis came, he knew what God had told him to do through Samuel. He's folded like a card table, okay? And what caused him to do this? It was the people scattering from him. They're all running for the hills, hiding away. They want a king, but they don't trust him. They don't got any confidence in this king to give him victory in this battle. In this battle, they're more terrified of the Philistines than they are of the king, than they are of the Lord, than they are of Samuel. We might even add. So therefore, Saul needed the Lord's help. He knew it. But the arrangement was the Lord would speak through Samuel to Saul, and we see him trying to cut out the middleman, Samuel, because he doesn't feel because he just didn't know what else to do. But he already had the instructions, and all he had to do, so he should have done was just kept waiting. And that's very difficult often. A lot of times the Lord will promise something, and then he'll make you wait, and he'll show up at the last possible minute. And the waiting is the hardest part often for people. So, and the Lord's testing you to see whether or not you're going to keep trusting him or not. Well, Saul failed this test here. Okay, so we're looking at Samuel's response to that. here in 1 Samuel 13, verses 13 through 15. And Samuel said to Saul, "You have done foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which commanded you. For now the Lord will have established your kingdom upon Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought him a man after his own heart, and he has commanded to be captain over his people, because you have not kept that which the Lord commanded you." And Samuel rose up and got him from Gilgal to Gibeah, unto Gibeah of Benjamin. And Saul numbered the people that were present with him, about 600,000 men. Sorry. I mean 600 men, not 600,000. So 600 men have stayed loyal to him. Remember, he picked out 3,000 before all this. Means if all these were part of that, means 2,400 of them left. Okay. You know, 4/5 of them just ran out to the bushes, and we'll be like, "We're praying for you," but not going to actually be in the fight. And maybe some more than them left. It's called the whole thing. But he has 600 left. And notice Samuel rose up and went from Gilgal to Gibeah. Okay, back to Gibeah. And remember Gibeah is that place long before Saul was born, but it's the last story. It's put last in the book of Judges, not because it's chronological, but because of the connection to Saul. And remember, Gibeah also means like a hill, like Gibeah. It's kind of related. You can hear it, Gibeah. Little bit different connotation with it, so he's gone back there. Now this is a little more defendable than Gilgal. Gilgal, like I said, it's like you're in a bow and the high ground's all around you. So Saul, we'll say that Saul followed him, but he numbered the people, and he didn't have hardly anyone left. Now he has no, and we'll see what that does to his confidence, ability to win. But that was the big problem: is he have not kept the commandment. It's always foolish not to keep the commandments of our God. No matter how foolish it looks to keep them. At the time, it looked foolish to Saul. I mean, everyone was leaving him, scattering from him. He's going to be out there by himself, it looked like. He should have obeyed him nonetheless. It's true with us today as well. But because he didn't, he's not going to get the benefit he would have got from obedience. Your kingdom's not going to continue. And the Lord's going to sought a man that his own heart, and we'll look at what that means. The Bible tells us very clearly what he means by that. We'll look at that later. But commanded to be kept over his people. Why? Because you have not kept that which the Lord commanded you. Okay, so Saul's shown he can't be trusted. He doesn't know how to follow the Lord through his prophet Samuel. And you are not fit to lead till you learn to first follow. So therefore, he's going to put someone in position, in this position, eventually, who will follow the instructions of the Lord, and therefore will be fit to lead the people of God in carrying out the purpose of God. Okay, let's continue on here in Samuel 13, 1 Samuel 13, verses 16 through 18. And we're going to look at the effect this has on Saul and the other people around him. And Saul and the Philistines and Jonathan and the people that were resident with abode in Gibeah of Benjamin, but the Philistines encamped in Michmash. And the spoilers came out of the camp of the Philistines in 3 companies. One turned into the way that leads to Orpah of the land of Sheol. The other turned away from the Beth Oren and turned the way the border looks to the valley of Zeboim in the wilderness. Okay, so notice Samuel and the people with him, they went up to the hill. Well, at least that's bearing down this, death in this death valley, as it were, as it were. But notice where they went, this Orpra. Well, what does that remind us of? That reminds us of remember it meant pearl, and that was that woman of the Moabitess who went back to Israel and went back to the people of Moab and to the gods of the Moabites, and did not stay with Naomi like Ruth, who came and turned her back on the gods of became part of the people of Israel instead of remaining part of the people of Moabites. So it meant pearl, and again, she was probably very beautiful, but her heart wasn't. Her heart wasn't. It was too, because first she wanted to stay with her. It was more out of duty, and when she was given, when Naomi gave her the release her from her duty because due to her marriage arrangements, she went right back. So 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 that so that's a that so that so that so that's important there for us to notice here. Now, this word Shuel means fox or jackal. So remember, the fox and jackals dig themselves holes to bury in. All right, so there's a land full of. Remember, we saw the pits that people were hiding in, and this place here, Beth Horon, means house of the cave. So again, this area is full of caves, full of pits, full of everything. All right. Orpha means young deer. I'm sorry. I had that wrong. I was thinking the other person was pearl. All right. She's young deer, fawn. Anyways, and the fawns are hidden, are hidden in their, hidden by their mothers in the thickets, just like some of the people were hiding in the thickets. And of course, our last place here is Zeboim. And gazelles or deers, what it means. All right, and gazelles again suggesting animals are good at escaping and blending in, and all this suggests this area is full of place for people to hide. Well, notice the Philistines are going to try to scare them out of these places. Three companies, over there with the deer, or the deer and the jackals. One over to the place of the caves, another that looks here toward the gazelle towards the wilderness. So they're going to try to hunt these Hebrews out to find them, and well, it's a search and destroy mission for them, because Jonathan and his 1,000 men had destroyed the Philistine garrison. They want to give the Philistines. I want to make a clear message to Israel. There's a heavy price to pay for doing this. Now we continue on here. We continue on here, and we're going to see that why Israel's so distressed about this. There's something else beyond just not having confidence in God. And being in this bad place, in this bad position, strategic, a very unstrategic location. Well, here's what we find. Here's what we find. Now, there was no smith found throughout in 1 Samuel 13 verses 19 to 23. We find out another reason why there's so much in hiding. Now, there was no smith found through all the land of Israel. For the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make them swords or spears. But all the Israelites went down to the Philistines, sharpening every man his shear, and his coulter, and his axe, and his mattock. Yet they had a file for the mattocks, for the coulters, and for the forks, for the axes, and to sharpen the goads. They came to pass in the day of battle, there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any of the people that were with Saul or Jonathan. And Jonathan, but Saul was with Jonathan was found that there was found. And the garrison of the Philistines went out to the passage of Michmash. Okay, there's a passage leading up there, and they posted a garrison there as well. And that garrison should have the ability, it's got the high ground to defend it. And also the sound the alarm, perhaps blowing a shofar or something like that, a horn, something to notify people in Michmash who could then come sweeping down and come around and to come around the defense. So they're the first line of defense for Michmash is what they are. And we're talking some of these weapons here. A mattock is like a pickaxe, with the axe end on both ends. I should give you a picture earlier, but yeah, this so it's kind of like here's some pickaxes that are also referred to as mattocks, and sometimes gives you an idea. Okay, so it's like a pickaxe, right? Now, so it's basically a pickaxe, as we called it when growing up. Now, so it's kind of like an axe type blade here, and one of the faces. No, it's this one. This one goes. This one's vertical. This one's horizontal. Let's make it big here. Okay, but so when you're hitting the ground with them, you need these sharpened. Now, of more interest, you have a shear, and here's a plow shear. Here's the shear. Again, parts going into the dirt has to be sharp to get through there. But more interesting is this part here called the coulter. The coulter here, this one, this light and this orangish brown color. This here, notice how it looks kind of like a machete. And this goes in front of the plow's being pulled. The horses are on this end, on the right, and it actually breaks the dirt up before the plow, makes it easier. The dirt breaks it, and notice it's got this early light. It's got this. They're obviously early at this time, and it looks like a machete. And this edge, of course, has to be sharpened, and maybe this edge too. You know, but particularly this edge here, and it'll go down. Typically, the plow blades going to about here, and you can see so they've got these farm tools because the Philistines, as we saw, they were spoilers. Okay, we saw earlier. Well, these spoilers, basically are waiting for crops to grow, and they're going to run and invade, and they're going to run in there and steal part of the crops. Well, they need to steal the crops. They need the Israelites growing the crops and be able to harvest them. So we got these tools here. An ox goes for goading the ox to keep going, and sometimes they have a point. Sometimes just a pointy stick, like we looked at before. And sometimes they have a point and a little hook, and that's the kind of guide the ox to keep going, quit going forward, to have it to stop when it doesn't want to stop, as opposed to goading it to make it go when it doesn't want to go. Okay, so these things here are all farm implements. And an axe, when you use the chopping wood with. Forks, think like pitchforks, not table forks used at your house. So there's a big sharpening stone wheel. So the Philistines have to go down there to sharpen these things at the stone wheel. The Philistines are overseeing the sharpening. but they have a file for doing this. And the trouble with the file is it takes you a whole lot longer to sharpen the same thing. We'll look here on our blade here. I mean, your file can do like this little piece here, this little piece. It'll take you a long time. That stone sharpening wheel can get the whole blade pretty quickly. Okay, but it's impractical for them to go back to the Philistines every single time. Maybe just this little part here gets nicked or whatever, and it needs sharpening, gets a nick or a burr, and just it needs sharpening. Well, always going to take the whole plow in every time. So they got a little file to do this little fine sharpening, but not the major sharpening. But still, you can sharpen the weapon with enough time to do this. So there is some. So the reason this is brought out is because those 600 men with Saul don't have swords and spears. The only ones that have one is Saul and Jonathan, his son. But they do have farm tools that they can turn into weapons. And now we're going to go to 1 Samuel. So they got a way to fight back. Well, in 1 Samuel 14, 1 through 5, we will continue on and see the response to the situation. Yeah, they have some way to fight back, but the other guys have chariots of iron and so on, have chariots and so on and so forth. Vastly superior technology compared to their crude homemade weapons they're going to be able to have to rely on. So now we're going to go to 1 Samuel 14, verse 1 through 5. We're going to see how people respond to this situation. Now it came to pass upon a day that John the son of Saul said to the young man that bare his armor, "Come, let's go over to the Philistines' garrison that is on the other side." But he told not his father. And Saul tarried in the othermost part of Gibeah, under a pomegranate tree, which is a Migron. The people there were with him about 600 men. And Ahiah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the priest in Shiloh, wearing an ephod. The people knew not that Jonathan was gone. And between the passages which Jonathan had sought to go over against the Philistines' garrison, there was a sharp rock on one side, a sharp rock on the other. And the name was one was Bezez, and the other was Sinah. And the one was situated against Michmash, and they're southward towards Gibeah. Okay, there's a little bit in here. We'll try to cover it. But let's notice the first thing. So there's two different responses to this situation. Saul didn't know what to do. Without Samuel telling him, he just does not have a clue. So he's sitting under this pomegranate tree, perhaps worried. He only has 600 men. They only have farming weapons. Okay. The Philistines are on the verge of going out and trying to hunt down all those who hid themselves to take revenge. They're not coming to Gibeah where Saul is, because they can perhaps fight. They might try to come there later, but they're looking for the people they can get one at a time. You don't have a chance against them. They're not even willing to fight these 600 men who are these pitchforks and whatever to fight back with. So that's what's going on there. That's what goes on there. And this place is at means landslide or prepucis. This probably prepucis is probably a better ideal. It's kind of got a point sitting there where he can look down and watch for the Philistines, but he's not taking any action. But and and who's with him is now the high priest. Ichabod's brother, remember Ichabod was born when Phineas and his two sons, and Phineas, his father, and Eli, his grandfather, died. The glories departed because the Ark of the Covenant was no longer in the tabernacle. And they didn't bring it back there either. They lifted the priest at Kirath Jearim, which was a holy, which was a which I believe is also known as Hebron, but it was one of the priestly cities given in the allotment of Moses to the priest. So it's being managed by the priest like it should be, but it's not ever been brought back to the tabernacle. 20 something years have gone by now. 23, 24 years minimum have gone by. Well, now this Ahai, Ichabod's older brother, has reached over to become priest. And his older brother, Atab, perhaps was priest before that. Remember, they're going to live short lives according to what I said. They're basically going to live long enough to have a son, raise him to be where he can be the high priest, and then die. That was part of that was part of the punishment to Eli for putting his sons over God, over obeying God. So now they're on this. This Bozez means slippery. Okay, so on one side, the forefront, this big rock here. Okay, you got these two sharp rocks in this passage between the passages. Okay, it's going to go. It's with the Philistines have set up this garrison, and once they've set up their garrison, and it would appear from the text it's on the side over northward towards Michmash. Makes sense. And that one's slippery. I mean, indicating it's hard to climb up. And everything's sharp and pointy on top of that. I mean, really, a really ideal place to a really ideal place for them to set up. Very, very well thought out on their behalf in that regard. But this other side means thorn bush. Sinai means like think Sinai. Sinai means thorn, literally. Sinai. Okay, Sinai means thorn bush. Okay. Or Sinai. Yeah, if they put that with a translator with an I instead of an E, it would have been easier to see that, but it means thorn bush. So that's the side that's towards Gibeah. Okay, the advantage there is we got those bushes to give you cover to hide in. And perhaps there's bushes up and down the whole slope as well. Okay, again, not quite as defendable, but it gives you cover for hiding. So if you're trying to sneak up and see what's going on, that's the side you'd want to go on. You wouldn't want to go on slippery over there. You'd want that's great for defense, but not so much for spying out, scouting. All right, so we'll continue on here at 1 Samuel and 1 Samuel 14, verses 10 through 6. And Jonathan said to the young man that bare his armor, "Come, let's go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be the Lord will work with us, for there is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few." And his armor bearer said to him, "Do all is in your heart. Turn you. Behold, I am with you according to your heart." Then said Jonathan, "Behold, we will pass over into these men, and we'll discover ourselves unto them. If they say thus to us, tarry till we come to you, then we'll stand still in our place and will not go up to them. If they say, come up to us, then we'll go up, for the Lord has delivered them into our hand, and this shall be a sign unto us." Okay. So notice a few outstanding things here. The garrison of these uncircumcised, and the Philistines, uncircumcised, no covenant with God. So maybe the Lord will work with us. It may be. He's not sure. But this much he knows. the fact the Lord can save by few or many, by many or few. Remember, Saul called him to take action, but when they all scattered, he only has 600 men left. He's become afraid. He doesn't know what to do. He's up there. He's up there under that pomegranate tree because he's got his eyes on the fact that he has few people relative to the other side. I mean, they had more camels or whatever than people on horseback than he has in his whole army. They're better equipped and so on and so forth. But his eyes is on what's going on, what I can see, touch, and feel. Jonathan's eyes are on the invisible God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yahuwah, Yahweh, however you like to say, Yahweh, Wahweh. That's where his eyes are. He doesn't know what he's going to do, so he proposes this test. And as his armor bearer is full of faith also. He's going to go with Jonathan and do what he said. And he's confident also the Lord's going to do this. So Jonathan gives him this test. And notice it's dependent upon the enemy, the actions of the enemy. The enemy's words will tell him whether they should go up there and fight them or not. He's not sure, but he's provided a test for God to give a sign to let him know. And sometimes that's how it works. Sometimes the Lord just speaks to us through the Holy Spirit, but sometimes a sign, and it's not necessarily wrong to ask for one. Sometimes, now when it's wrong is when he's already given you one. Why it was wrong, in the days of Messiah, was he'd already done all these miraculous signs to confirm the word, and they were, just saying, well, what sign do you show us? Well, they already shown them a bunch of signs because they weren't looking for a sign, being cautious and careful to make sure he wasn't a false teacher. It was kind of mocking in a way. They wanted a sign that met their specifications basically, and God already given many signs, things were impossible for men to do that had already confirmed it. So they were asking not skeptically, want to make sure he's really who he says, but out of unbelief and just taunting him basically. But when you're just asking God, I don't know what to do here, I should do A or B, and ask for a sign, God may honor that. Okay, so now let's continue on. So we continue on here in 1 Samuel 14, verses 11 to 14. And both of them discovered themselves under the garrison of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, behold, the Hebrews now come forth out of the holes where they hid themselves. And the men of the garrison answered Jonathan, his armor bearer, and said, come up to us, and we'll show you a thing. Then Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come up after me, for the Lord has delivered them into the hand of Israel. And Jonathan climbed upon his hands and upon his feet, and his armor bearer after him. And they fell before Jonathan, his armor bearer slew after him. And at that first slaughter, which Jonathan's armor bearer made, about 20 men within, as it were, half an acre of land, which a yoke of oxen might plow. Okay, remember our plow blades and the coulter we'd mentioned earlier. There's a connection here with this about the yoke of oxen might plow. Half an acre of land. Okay, so notice they come out of their hoes, they hid themselves. Remember those places we looked at all meant like hoes or reference to animals that dug burrows or hidden thorns, bushes, etc. And this places means thorn bush. So they see him, and and notice Jonathan has total faithfulness. And notice Jonathan leads. He didn't put his armor bearer in front of him to carry a shield, whatever, to carry a shield before him or whatever. And we'll contrast that later with someone though where we see the exact opposite situation. And why does he lead? Because the other one wasn't uncommon, because he has confidence in the Lord God of Israel. Come up after me, the Lord gave him the sign he asked for. And he's confident it's the Lord's doing. I mean, it's possible they could have said something else entirely, not one of those two things. So now notice, so Jonathan and his armor bearer are slaying together. They felt so Jonathan's perhaps getting the ones right in front of him, and his armor bearer is getting the ones that where Jonathan can't reach. And there might have been situations where they had their backs to each other, but it's a team effort. And they kill about 20 men, so they're outnumbered about 10-1. And it's a victory. It's really a small victory, really, on the surface. Okay, now they've taken out this garrison, that first line of defense for Michmash, where the main part of the army's at in this very defendable place, the feasible place, and could maybe open up a little pathway, as it were. Now this garrison's out of the way to Michmash itself, but there's 30,000 chariots over in Michmash. There's these other things we read about, and who knows how many thousands are there. And Saul's got 600. His fire back there has 600 men plus with farming implements, which, by the way, Jonathan's armor bearer, was probably also carrying one of those farming implements as well, perhaps the coulter, because remember, only Jonathan and Saul had a sword and a spear. So now it's time to look at the effect, though, this has on everyone, this act of Jonathan and his armor bearer. And really the act of God. They were outnumbered, better weapons, particularly his armor bearer's case. It obviously didn't have a sword and a spear, or maybe Jonathan let him have one and Jonathan took the other. But if he's just using the coulter or something, obviously, and this is obviously the Lord's work, and everyone and the Philistines have caught on, are going to catch on. And with a trembling in the host in the field, and among all the people, the garrisons and the spoilers, they also trembled, and the earth quaked. So it was a very great trembling. The watchmen of Gibeah of Jonathan looked, and behold, the multitude melted away, and they went on beating down one another. Then Saul said unto the people that were with him, Number now, and see who is gone from us. And when they had numbered, behold, Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there. Okay, so there's an the earth quaked as well. There's a trembling. The people, the Philistines, they have this huge army, and they're terrified. The spoilers who are out there looking to steal the crops, and also out there looking for these people who've hidden themselves, are terrified. And this trembling has produced an earthquake, a trembling as well. And now watch what happens. The watchmen of Saul see the multitude melt away, and they're fighting each other. So Saul wants to know he's trying to find out who's responsible for this, and comes up. They call muster, as it were, take a head count, and find out Jonathan and his armor bearer are not there. Now we continue on here in 1 Samuel 14, verse 18 through 19, and we see the next thing Saul does. And Saul said to Ahiah, bring to here the ark of God. The ark of God was at that time with the children of Israel. And it came to pass while Saul talked to the priests that the noise of the host of the Philistines went on and increased. And Saul said to the priest, withdraw your hand. Okay, so first he's about to repeat the mistake that happened in the days of Eli, where he's going to bring the ark, looking for it to protect him and save him. Putting his faith in something he can see, touch, and feel on the God, but he catches himself in this case. These Philistines killing each other and fighting each other just gets louder and louder, and he realizes he doesn't need the ark. And the ark wasn't that close. I mean, if it's still in Kirjath Jearim, the priest's going to take him a day to get there and back with it. But Saul changes his mind when he realizes it's not needed. The ark's not God, and God doesn't need the ark to bring us deliverance. So let's continue on here. Let's continue on here in 1 Samuel 14, 20 through 23. Verses 20 through 23. And Saul and all the people who were with him assembled themselves, and they came to the battle, and behold, every man's sword was against his fellow. There was a great discomfiture. Moreover, the Hebrews that were with the Philistines before that time, which went up with them into the camp of the country round about, even they turned to be with the Israelites that were with Saul and Jonathan. Likewise, all the men of Israel that hid themselves in Mount Ephraim, when they heard the Philistines fled, even they also followed after them hard after them in battle. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle passed over unto Beth Aven. And so this battle's moved to the house of the cave. I'm sorry, not the house of idols. Remember, the house of idols was east of Michmash. So it's when they've driven them eastward, which is, of course, the Philistines' home. The Philistines' land is westward. So, so they're moving. They're kind of moving them. They're kind of fleeing the wrong direction as a result of all these people. The battle passes over. Now it's moving there. Now, so notice Saul and the 600 said, assembled, so they came to the battle. And they find the Philistines are killing each other. Now notice there's Hebrews that were with the Philistines before that time. Okay, well, what's this tell us? They turn to be with the Israelites. Notice how they're Hebrews, not Israelites in this context. Well, why? Because when they're with the Philistines, they've aligned themselves with the God of the Philistines. But now they turn to be with the Israelites. They've come back to the God of Israel. And now all those people that hid themselves, an army of Sauls, presumably it's based like the previous one, perhaps 300,000. Most of them hide themselves. Well, they're fighting. Now they get brave and fall hard. So some of the Philistines are killing each other, and others are fleeing for their lives. They're following him hard. And notice the Lord's the one that saved Israel that day. Jonathan and his armor bearer's part was listening to God, waiting for his instructions, through that sign, acting on them, and generally acting in faith. God once again has done all the heavy lifting. That's why the Lord can deliver, with fewer many. We've seen cases where he had them gather a huge army and fight, But in this case, if the army won't show up or whatever, the Lord can still deliver, like he did in the days of Shamgar and Samson, who fought the Philistines all by themselves. And Samson killed over 4,000 men, perhaps up to 5,000. One place it's not really specified how many they killed, but he killed. But somewhere over 4,000, we can safely say 4,030 plus. Well, now let's continue on in 1 Samuel 14, verse 24 through 28. And the men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had adjured the people, saying, Cursed be the man that eats any food till evening, that I may be avenged of my enemies. So none of the people tasted any food. And they came to the land, and all they of the land came to a wood. There was honey on the ground. And when the people had come to the wood, behold, the honey dropped, but no man put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan heard not his father charge people the oath. Therefore, he put forth the end of the rod that was in his hand, and dipped it in a honeycomb, and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes were enlightened. Then answered one of the people and said, Your father surely charged people an oath, saying, Cursed be the man that eats any food this day. And the people were faint. Okay, here's Saul. Notice no Samuel here giving him instructions, making their foolish choice. And that foolish choice is to tell people they can't eat until sundown. He's got a one-track mind, destruction. I may be avenged of my enemies. I mean, that's all he's thinking about. Okay. Hulk on a rampage, whatever, you want to think about like that. But that's all. And so he don't want anyone stopping to take time to get something to eat. So people are afraid of him. They don't. As a result, they're faint. Well, now Jonathan didn't hear this, doesn't know that Saul's made this foolish commandment. The eighth time they come, notice his eyes were enlightened. You see, when you run low on sugar, this is why people with diabetes go blind sometimes, because they're not getting blood sugar to their eyes to strengthen. And when you're just that's sometimes if you haven't eaten and you feel faint and you're tired and you don't see as well, it's because you don't have the sugar's not in your blood to get to your eyes properly. But when Jonathan eats this, he now his eyes light up. So he's not faint and weak, but they are. And he did this out of ignorance. He wasn't rebelling against his father's commandment. If he'd known about it, he would have kept it, even though it's foolish. He would have kept it. But Saul's destructive. This was destructive to the people, weakening them like this. And they're using up extra energy because they're out fighting. Well, let's continue on here in 1 Samuel 14, verses 29 to 31. We see what Jonathan's response is and what happens afterwards. Then Jonathan said, My father has troubled the land. See, I pray you how my eyes have been enlightened because I taste a little honey. How much more have happily people eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies they found? For there not been a much greater slaughter among the Philistines? They smote the Philistines all the way from Michmash to Aijalon. And the people were very faint. Okay, remember Aijalon is where Joshua had called out for the sun to stand still. And really, it's the earth staying still, but when you're on the ground, the perspective is the sun's not moving. But anyway, it's got the same effect either way. So the people went there, but they could have went a lot further, and they could have killed a lot more. A lot of the Philistines got away because people just simply didn't have the energy. They're very faint. They're weak. They didn't have the energy to keep chasing these guys. And when they found them, didn't have the energy to fight them and kill them. And they've ran quite a distance here. Got a little map here. Gives you kind of an idea. Here's Elijah on down here. Okay. And so they've chased him about 20 or 30 miles. Okay. It's a long way to chase them since they're on foot, particularly. But a lot of the Philistines got away because of this because of this stupid thing Saul did. No wisdom at all. Foolish decision. Well, there's more of this foolish decision that is going to cause the people, is going to have another effect, this foolish decision on the people of Israel, besides physical weakness, and that is spiritual weakness as well. And this is what we see here in 1 Samuel 14:32 through 34. The people flew upon the spoil and took the sheep and the oxen and the calves and slew them on the ground, the people that eat them with the blood. And then they told Saul, saying, "Well, the people sin against the Lord that they eat with the blood." Said you have, and he said, "You have transgressed. Roll a great stone to me this day." And Saul said, "Disperse those among the people and say to them, bring me to here every man his ox, every man his sheep, and slay them here and eat, and sin not against the Lord and eat them with the blood." The people brought every man his ox with him that night and slew them there. Okay, it's very serious. The thing not in the flesh of the blood start with Noah. Noah, when he got off the ark, about 500 years before the time of Moses, received the law by more than 400 years, 500 years or so, and the law said that they had agreed to. They're under the covenant. The penalty for eating the blood was death. But Saul had told them but they're so hungry and faint, they're not thinking about the consequences. Their leader has acted foolishly now, and so are they. Well, it's true they've sinned against the Lord, but notice Saul takes no. You have transgressed. Takes no responsibility for putting them in this predicament to start with. To put them in this place of temptation. So notice at that night, it's nighttime. They're eating them. They're killing them and eating them. It's blood. They're so hungry they're eating them without cooking them or nothing. They're just killing them and eating them raw, and they got blood all over their face and everything because they're so weak. They're right, and they've been fighting so hard and using so much energy that they just feel absolutely starved to death. They've lost all restraint. So, you know, Saul put them in danger of being, well, killed, in accordance to the law. So he's been very foolish. He has strength, but Samuel has the wisdom. And without Samuel, he's king, but he's a destructive king. Not just to the enemies of God, but also to his own people, to his own land. My father's troubled the land. But he's not done. He's not done with his foolish, destructive behavior. Let's continue on. We'll continue on and see that here as we continue on in 1 Samuel 14, verse 35 and 37. And Saul built an altar to the Lord, and the same that was the first altar that he built to the Lord. And Saul said, "Let us go down to the Philistines by night and spoil them to the morning light. Let's not leave a man of them." And they said, "Do whatever seems good to you." They said to the priest, let us draw to here near here to God. God ask counsel of God. And Saul asked counsel of God. "Shall I go down to the Philistines, out of the Philistines? Will you deliver them into the hand of Israel?" But he answered him not that day. Okay, why do we see Saul doing it? Repeating his mistake from earlier. in a way. He's got the priest here to do this now. But Saul's plan here is to make an altar. He's going to be able to make a sacrifice. He built he's built this altar to the Lord, but he's gonna perhaps there's already one down in Gilgal, but he built this one himself. We're gonna assume he did it, and there's no indication to believe otherwise. He used uncut stones, and so he's got the priest there. But who was supposed to be telling Saul instructions from the Lord? Samuel. And once again we see him not waiting for Samuel, not even sitting for Samuel, but take matters in his own hands, and God doesn't answer him. He's got the priest right there. And this means the high priest, perhaps the Urim and Thummim with him. But God would not give him an answer because Saul is not meant to get an answer from God directly. God's the brains, really. Samuel's the middleman, and Saul's the muscle. And that's the way this is supposed to operate. Well, now we're looking at Saul's response, his conclusion about why he's not getting an answer, and his response, what he thinks needs to be done to get one. Because he doesn't know if he should go fight him or not. If God's not in it, he doesn't want to do it. So here's what Saul concludes in 1 Samuel 14, verse 38 through 42, about the root of the problem, why God's not answering. And Saul said, draw you near here, all the chief of the people, and know and see wherein this sin has been this day. As the Lord lives, which saves Israel, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. There was not a man among all the people that answered him. Okay, well, most of the people have sinned in the eating of these things of the blood, as we saw. The way most of the people he's talking to are guilty. But Saul says, whoever it is, we're going to kill him. Kill him, get right back with, and then put him right back with God if that's the cause. He just assumes it's the cause. He doesn't know. They said to all Israel, you be on one side, and I and Jonathan will be on the other side. The people said to him, do what seems good to you. And Saul said to the people of Israel, said to the Lord God of Israel, give a perfect lot. And Samuel and Saul were taken, but the people escaped. And Saul said, cast lots between me and my son, and Jonathan, my son. And Jonathan was taken. And now the Lord's answering him by lot. Okay. Another way the Lord sometimes answered people. This went on all the way to the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and there's never another mention of casting of lots again after that. But this is one of the ways. Apparently, the Urim and Thummim didn't work, or the priest didn't bring him with him, one or the other. And now, so he's going with this lot method. Now, he wants to know. His conclusion is the reason why God's not answering him is because someone has sinned. We'll look at what sin he thinks he has in mind particularly, and they have to die. I mean, he's ready to destroy him. He's destructive, but not wise. He's strong without wisdom, and it makes him destructive. Well, let's continue on here in 1 Samuel 14, in verses 43 through 45. We're going to see how this turns out for them. How this turns out for him. Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. And Jonathan told him and said, I eat but little honey with the end of a rod is in my hand, and lo, I must die. And Saul answered, Gods do so and more also. We shall surely die, Jonathan. He said to Saul, Jonathan shall not die who wrought this great salvation. Shall Jonathan die who wrought this great salvation in Israel? God forbid. As the Lord lives, there shall not one hair of his head fall to the ground, for he has wrought for his wrought with God this day. So the people rescued Jonathan, he died not. Okay. Saul was ready to kill his own son over something he did in ignorance, not in rebellion. He told him that, but I'm sure he let with that part, and I didn't know you'd given this commandment. Saul, I mean, we've seen over and over again, God does not treat ignorance and rebellion the same. But Saul was going to treat him the same. And notice now the people are leading Saul. They're protecting Jonathan. And why? Jonathan's the one God used to bring this salvation, this great salvation. Saul is just enraged someone disobeyed his commandment, even if it was in ignorance. And it's foolish, but the people are not foolish, and Jonathan's not foolish. So now Jonathan's been rescued. We're going to see what else Saul has is going to do to bring deliverance to Israel, being destructive in a good way, the way the Lord meant. Why he chose, one of the reasons he chose him in the first place. Chose him that tribe of Benjamin, that ravening wolf, that destroying wolf. Then Saul went up from falling the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. Oh, we're in 1 Samuel 14, verses 46 to 48. So Saul took the kingdom over Israel and fought against all his enemies on every side. Against Moab, against the children of Ammon, against Edom, against the kings of Zobah, and against the Philistines. Wherever so he turned himself, he vexed them. They gathered a host and smote the Amalekites and delivered them delivered Israel out of the hands of them that spoiled them. Okay, notice all these kings have been spoiling them. The Moabites, we'll get our land here. The Moabites down here, they fought in the days of Judges. The Ammonites here, along this eastern border, the Edomites down here, and way down here we came. See, the Amalekites, that's the people who attacked. That's the people who attacked Israel in the first place. That's who attacked Israel in the first place. In the wilderness, with attacks of women and children in the hinder part. The Philistines, who are over here, there's the land of the Philistines, remember, means invaders. They're not part of the Canaanites. They invade. In fact, notice the Canaanites are not even listed. Remember, Israel, we saw, had made peace with the Amorites that were left in the land, and there was no more. And there was no more. There was no more Amorites left in the land. Okay, so, and this other group here, it means encampment, and they're way up here north in the area of Syria. Probably can't see it on my. They're way up in this area, okay, to the north. So all these people have been invading Israel this entire time of the Judges. Remember, it started with the Philistines. Remember, it started off with the Philistines before Samuel was born, and for 40 years, they had ruled over Israel, and Samson freed them from their reign, but not from their oppression. And they were the only ones that oppressed them. It took 60 more years, 100 years after it started, for Israel finally repented. And through Samuel, this deliverance came of thundering. and brought the thundering upon him. And now, and then we saw last week when Achash had come from Ammon, and his army was destroyed as well. So Saul, so Saul's got his hands full. There's all these people who just used to in spoiling Israel, invading in, coming down, raping, killing, pillaging, burning crops, whatever, going, stealing food. So that's their main thing, is to try to steal the food and return back up here, and perhaps take captive, take the women captive or whatever, to use in sex trafficking or whatever. And the situation didn't stop with Samuel brought about that one victory under Samuel, or even when Saul and that other victory against Nachash, which meant serpent. And it didn't even stop with this great victory against the Philistines. Samuel, this is a summary of Saul's life all the way to his end. He's fighting against all these forces, and he's being destructive and vexed them. He's destroying them. Wherever he turns himself, as he finds opportunity, remember the wolf is destructive, is tactical, and looks for opportunities. And that's what Saul's doing. And this is actually carrying out the will of God for him, why he was chosen. One of his attributes that the Lord could use was his destructive nature, as long as it's being guided by wisdom that would come from God himself through Samuel. Now we continue on 1 Samuel 14, verses 49 to 51, and we read about the family of Saul at the time he became king. We'll see later it's going to expand. Now the sons of Saul were Jonathan and Ishui and Melchi-Shua. The names of his two daughters were these. The name of the firstborn was Merab, and the younger Michelle, we'd say Michelle today, Michal. And the wife of Saul's, the name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, and Ahi, the daughter of Ahimaaz. And the name of the captain of the host was Abner, the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. So Abner's Saul's cousin. And Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. So Kish and Abner are both sons of Abiel here. Okay, because Ner is Kish's brother. So this is his family. Notice it's not very many people really we're talking about here. The royal family, extended royal family, will say. Saul's got 3 sons, 2 daughters. There's 5. He's got his wife, makes 6. Himself makes 7. And we don't know if his wife's father's still alive, but let's say he is. Makes 8. Abner makes 9. 10, 11. And maybe Abiel's alive would be 12. Okay, very small, even extended family here of Shaul. But of particular interest is Jonathan was his oldest son. Remember, the oldest son has the birthright and the blessing; it's theirs to lose. Jonathan was the heir apparent to be king after Saul. And Saul, because he's so destructive, would have destroyed his own. He would have destroyed his own family. There would have been bare feelings among his family if he'd killed Jonathan over breaking commandment that Jonathan didn't even know Saul had given. He was destructive to his own family as well, because he has no wisdom, and he needs someone to give it to him. But as in his impatience, he hasn't waited for it, and it's made him destructive. There's one last destructive thing Saul's going to do here. The destructive king we see in 1 Samuel 14, verses 52. There was sore war against the Philistines all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw a strong man or a very valiant man, he took him to him. Remember, we talked about at the beginning how Samuel had warned that this was going to happen. Now Saul's doing it. Remember, Saul's always being guided by his eyes. Notice strong or valiant, he took him with him. Well, there's other people who could have been helpful to him, but Saul's got that, again, dumb jock, for lack of a better term, mentality. He's looking at physical strength and bravery. But the truth is as the Irish say, if you can't be strong, you better be clever. Some people could have been quite valued to him, not because they were physically strong, but mentally so, clever, more strategic thinking than Saul. But Saul is now not letting anyone tell him what to do. So the lesson from our destructive king, the big takeaway is this: strength without wisdom is destructive. All of us have some area in our life where we're strong at in some area. Some of them may be like Saul, their physical bodies. And there's nothing wrong with that. God gave them that ability. But they will not listen. They don't know what to do, and they will not listen. Eventually they'll get to the point where, even though it's disastrous when they go on their own, they get where they quit even consulting someone for wisdom. Well, some of those minds are strong as well. As people would say, book smart. They don't know, but even wise people, that's their strength. If you become too self-reliant and not relying on the Lord, it can still cause you things. Look at Samuel. Shlomo, Solomon, the wisest man, the wisest man until the time of Messiah, besides Messiah, that ever lived. Yet he did foolish things that brought hurt to himself. Because the wisest of all is the Lord. And Solomon became self-reliant on his own wisdom. And it brought destruction in many ways. And we'll look at that. We'll look at that in a future lesson, maybe a year or so from now. So let us first of all not assume we don't need wisdom no matter who we are. Because even if we're even we're the wisest person around in our area, wherever, we're still not as wise as the Almighty. We still need wisdom. And the Almighty may not answer us directly. He may want to give us a message through another person. So we have to listen. We have to, like in Saul's case, he knew that person was Samuel, and has to listen to him. And, and the same is true for everyone else. All of us are subject to making poor decisions at times. And we need not lean on our own understanding, but put our trust in the Lord and walk in his counsel. So our strength that was meant for the purposes of the Lord to bring about his purposes of restoration to his people does not become destructive. Don't let pride destroy you and those around you to turn what God meant for good that he gave you into something that is a tool for evil. That's all I have for this week. Until next week, shalom.